Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the introductions and the kind words. Yes, Erik Ott Growth Advisors, and we are delighted to carry on this episode of exploring best practices for cannabis brand expansion. And I can't think of a better guest to have on to do this than Kristi Palmer, co-founder of Kiva Confections. Kristi, welcome to DeepRoots.
Thank you, Erik. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. We're going to cover a lot of ground today, but if we don't talk about cannabis-infused turkey gravy first, then we would be remiss. Share with us just real quick, how did that come about, and tell us about it.
Yep. So cannabis gravy is one of our favorite kind of little in and out limited time offer products that we do. We did this product first in 2019. It came about, marketing team was like, we got to do something super cool. And it's turkey gravy. And at the time, Scott, my husband, he still now is actually running R&D, but he was, he was receiving that feedback from the marketing team going, Thanksgiving's in like 5 weeks, right? So they negotiated, came up with, all right, let's do a small run of gravy. We launched that. It was super duper fun and got tons of media attention, tons of press. It was on the Stephen Colbert show. So it did so much more than we ever could have expected. And then we brought it back again this year. And it's a hot little item. Like, it's tough to find. It was sold out on the Kiva website. Like, we had to, basically break into the warehouse and take a case to our own Thanksgiving, and it disappeared. So yeah, it's super fun, gets everybody energized.
Next year I'm +1 at your house for Thanksgiving.
Perfect, come on over.
Well, great, thanks for that. So Kristi, I think if I'm not mistaken, you started your first state expansion, quite a few years ago. And I imagine when you first launched into new states, maybe the way you approached those states was different than the way you do it today. Share with us, like, how did it start and what's the progression? Like, how much more maybe sophisticated are you today than you were back in the first days? But share about the analytics that you've put into the project.
Yep. So Arizona was our first state back in 2014. And it's an apples and oranges comparison from then to now. Then we had obviously zero experience, had no experience doing licensing arrangements, and our only product lines at that point were chocolate bars and our terabytes, our chocolate covered espresso beans and blueberries, things like that. So it was a much more simple arrangement, simple operation, but God, now we have a full team. That's probably the biggest difference is 2014, we would launch with a skeleton crew. You kind of like get your products into Arizona and then you go, okay, here we go. We're just going to sit back and let it go. And no, that's not, you can't do that today and expect any kind of results, right? I'll call it that. So today, we have a full team. We have marketing plans. We have people in market. We have, a whole system that we've created to support our out-of-state expansion. So yeah, it has, it's changed. It's a night and day difference.
Yeah, no, I got to believe that the role of marketing in terms of like headcount and investing in new markets. When you started in Arizona, you had a brand. It was close to California. They probably knew the brand Kiva, and that you got some tailwind there. But in terms of even going back to Arizona, how did you even structure those original partnerships? And was it just like, let's see what happens, let's learn from this and then refine it as you go? Or how did you kind of manage that process?
Yep. So actually, I would say the structure really hasn't changed too much. So primarily what we've done up to this point is a licensing arrangement. So, people like to call it a franchise if they're not kind of keen on how it works in cannabis. So it's not quite as onerous as a franchise, but, licensing. So we are helping them create, they're basically using the logos, the formulations, creating the Kiva products up to spec in their market. And, they handle sales and marketing and distribution for the most part. We've now, so a different part of the relationships that we put in now, we have found much more success with Kiva handling the sales and the marketing. So that structurally, the deals are the same. We're still doing licensing. We were then, we were now. We're open to other ideas, of course, and how maybe there are other ways to get to market that might work better. But the biggest thing is we now really get in there with sales and marketing support. So that's a whole different part of the structure that wasn't there before.
Great. Well, I think we'll come back to that a little later. So let's go into like let's, based on where you are today, how do you determine what states you need to go in? I mean, obviously we can say, oh, you got to be in New York, but I mean, there's a lot of states out there. Some of them are small, Vermont, Maine. What goes into your decision-making process of where do we go next? Is it just like we've got to be everywhere? Or is it, there's actually a lot of things, the population, the partner, the regulatory, the competitive analysis. What are the factors that you hone in on to say, let's go here?
Yep. So as you know, as the audience knows, each state is its own little universe. So in some of those examples that you brought up, like New York is super interesting because of its population. But if Kiva wanted to start there now, like that's not possible because they don't have the proper regulations. So population, regulation, do they allow edibles? That's a big one, right? And maybe that's at the top of the list.
Details.
And then you've got a city, or a state like Oregon or Washington, where they have a really well-established market already. So do you want to go spend your dollars in a place that's established and try to fight to the top and outcompete the existing players, outspend the existing players? Or do you want to be first to market in a place like New York, for example? So those are some of the big ones. And then also, what is the partner set like? So who are the people that you're going to be working with? Because you take a state like Florida, and it's a very limited market in terms of who the partners are that are available to a brand like Kiva to work with. So those are definitely the top things that we're looking at.
So the limited license markets are obviously limited and have fewer players in them, and other markets are much more competitive that look a lot like California, where you've been competing for the last many years. When you look at the limited markets and you say, is that really a function of finding the right partner? I think you partnered with Cresco, I believe, in a market or two. Is that attractive to you to say, let's partner with either an MSO or somebody that's got a limited license and kind of, get in early versus going into a market, like you said, like Oregon, where it's, like California, a little bit more competitive? Is that attractive to partner with the bigger players there?
Yeah, so with the bigger players, it cuts both ways. So there can be some benefits. They can take you to multiple markets. So, maybe they have operations in Florida, maybe Pennsylvania, maybe New Jersey as well. Like that's kind of nice to have one partner in multiple markets. But then you also have one partner in multiple markets, which can mean that if something goes wrong in Florida, now Pennsylvania and New Jersey are also at risk potentially. And it gets really kind of convoluted pretty quickly, especially as you have MSOs going to many different states and doing different parts of the supply chain. Like that can start to affect relationships that you have in California, or so it gets tricky. It's kind of a fine line to walk, but I think it just really kind of depends on what your goals are, what your relationships are like, and what your how everybody's incentivized, and that makes a really big difference.
Yeah, I got to believe the difference between partnering with a large player that has their own agenda and a smaller company that has an infrastructure in place, but is literally there every day, day in and day out to grow your business. Your success matters to their bottom line. Is a benefit. I mean, what are the things that you're looking for? What are the assets and the resources that you look for in a partner?
Yeah. So space is huge, right? You find who you think is the perfect person. They have 1,000 square feet and we need 5,000 square feet, or they don't have access to storage. Like, okay, well, we can't make our products if we can't store our inventory. So that is a big one. Seems, when you kind of say it out loud, it sounds like fairly insignificant, but if you've ever looked for space in the cannabis industry, trying to get licensable space, it's huge. It's a huge hurdle. It's something we've been doing in California. We're always looking for space in California as we expand and as different kind of tax favorability comes up or real estate favorability, the market dynamics change. So space, space is a big one. Supply chain is another really big one. Does the partner have access to raw material, or are they well connected? Do they cultivate themselves? And then also, what types of raw materials are even available in that market anyway? If it's a market that is really supply constrained, that might end up being like a distillate only market, which for us won't really work. For Lost Farm, which is live resin, we like to put cold water hash in our chocolate products. So those are some of the issues, some of the criteria we're looking at.
Right. So the whole market is evolving, particularly on the East Coast, where there's not a lot of outdoor grow. There's a lot of indoor, of course, but in terms of having the competencies in a partner that knows 3 different extraction models to give you 3 different kind of outputs to fit into your products, which demand, a very consistent taste and texture and all that, I imagine can be challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you be certain? Is it really, okay, let's just look at your direct supply. Where's your farm? How much do you produce? Or is it, how do you, if we need more, do you have relationships? I mean, how involved do you get in the supply chain in terms of analysis of your partner?
Yeah, I would say now more than ever, particularly with Lost Farm. So we hired somebody full-time. She's amazing, Nix. She's fabulous. She used to work with Kiva a long time ago, and then she came back, and now she specifically does sourcing for Lost Farm. And so she works with our brand manager for Lost Farm as well. They pick the strains, they talk with the partners, and they work on it like strain by strain, product line by product line, and try to find the right materials. So it's kind of maybe not boots on the ground is maybe not quite the right way to profile it because she's here in California, but we're working hand in hand with the partner to make sure that sourcing can support our products. And then we can't, if we find, okay, no, the state has no live resin producers, then okay, that might require the partner investing in live resin equipment. Or maybe we're now making connections with groups that will have live resin in 6 months. And so it's a lot of development planning to get those extraction methods just right.
Yeah, no, gotta be a bit of a challenge there. So a lot of people talk when they say, I want to go to a new market, they meet a partner and they say, oh shoot, that partner has a competing brand to us, right? And so there's a lot of debate as to whether you want a co-packer that does nothing, including no sales and marketing, so I'll take care of everything, make my product, or partnering with somebody that has another brand. Again, there might be some competition, and there are some co-packers that have 15, 20 different brands that they're working with. Where do you lie on the continuum of like, no, we don't actually want to partner with another brand because they're competitive to us, and we're not here to drag them into the stores on our coattails, or maybe they're actually in stores and you're riding. But how does that that competitive dynamic come into play?
Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot. So it's still something we think about and we're in like constantly considering. But I think what is super important is first and foremost that your product is unique, and your product is not the exact same, right? A Kiva Lost Farm is not the exact same as a Wana offering or a Wild offering. Like those are our strongest competitors in other states. But certainly if we have the exact same product, that's going to make it really hard for both of us to compete. So I think one of the first things you have to do is ensure that you're different and your products are unique. Then I think, we have partners that kind of do both. We have both those models that you mentioned. So I think then how your product is being made, the quality component is really important, but the sales component out in the market, that is huge, right? Are you building relationships with stores? Do you have a competitive offering? Is it a competitive price? Are you kind of playing the game with deals and promotions? And are you marketing like it's how your product is produced and made is one thing, but the sales, marketing, all those other efforts, that's where you're going to really drive revenue and drive traffic.
So it's Kiva sales and service exported into new market without the trucks on the road. I mean, you really have to replicate that and have relationships. I mean, everybody in California knows Kiva, and many of the dispensary owners that you've done business with for going on 10 years. But in a new market, you walk in, it's just evolving. There's brand new people to meet, trust to be built, and you basically have determined that you better control your own destiny. Is that right? Is that a fair way to, from the sales and marketing perspective?
That seems to be most effective. Yeah, that seems to be most effective. So you can go into a market and not control your own destiny, and have sales and marketing be done by the partner. And we've seen that work sometimes. So the person representing your product, if they're super excited about it and maybe that's all they have to sell, they can still be successful at it, but it's less likely than if we, go in with our team, with kind of our energy and enthusiasm and knowledge base and get it done. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that come with, like, let's talk a little bit about product market fit, right? You're a house of brands on the edible side. You do most things and probably looking at doing more. When you look at a market, do you say, geez, I mean, okay, let's assume for a second that you are able to do all your products. It's legal, you can do chocolate, you can do everything. Do you look at that and say, all right, how do we start? Do we start with a limited, SKU package here of 10 SKUs, or is it, no, we got to go in, we got to launch everything at the same time? What's the data that you look at to say, what do we start with something, or is it just house of brands, house of brands, house of brands?
Yeah, so yeah, we do want all of our products in every market. It's definitely tricky to start with all of your SKUs right out of the get-go. So gummy is king. So gummy is our lead horse, and we now have kind of our two levers that we can pull with gummy. So we've got Camino, and Camino has, we call it base. Then Camino has sours, and then Lost Farm has a gummy. So we can come in with 5 milligram, 10 milligram, sugar coated, sour, strain specific, extraction method specific. So we have gummy is like our lead horse. We do want the chocolate, like I mentioned, we want that, but that's not, it's not driving the same amount of brand awareness, traffic, revenue, like maybe it used to be, right? Chocolate as a category is beginning to really trail. Gummy, even chew is becoming very popular too. So yes, we want all of our items in there, but like if a partner says they can't take gummy, then like, okay, we probably have a non-starter there. And we're in a market like Hawaii, which is is not really an edible market. You can have tablets there. So we have entered a market before without our lead players, but Hawaii, I think we went in there like 6 years ago, and that one was, I think, more for practice, and it's a much smaller market. So we probably wouldn't repeat another arrangement like that in today's times.
Unless it had really good long weekend benefits like Hawaii does.
Exactly. A founder's market.
So is there like, do you limit your market risk by having more products? I mean, if you found like, okay, gummies are the starting point, but we need to actually layer these other ones on pretty quickly, because now we're at the house of brands. We occupy space on the shelf, more space, which is a critical part in this in cannabis to gain consumer awareness. Do you feel like getting to a point where you're the house of brands on the shelves actually reduces the risk associated with being, the brand in a market?
Yeah, totally, Eric. I think you hit the nail on the head with that shelf space, taking up that room, also blocking out others, right? So if you do have your chocolate, then you block out other chocolate players from coming in and taking that shelf presence and having that communication with the consumer. So yeah, definitely, we want to come in with the full suite to kind of defend our kind of edibles territory, and present the best options and the best product offerings to the consumer. Like, we've created a tailored portfolio that allows all these different entry points for a wide variety of consumers. And so having the whole product suite there helps us keep that up.
So where you've accomplished that, you've achieved some level of scale, right? You're in a market, you break into a new market, it's state by state. When you think of that word scale, what does scale mean to you as you go into these markets and as you build the business?
Yeah, I think scale means gaining some efficiencies. Yeah, because it is with a lot of product lines, especially, it can be pretty costly to produce a small batch, right, or a small run. But when you hit some scale, then you're starting to see a bit of efficiencies, which is better for your margins and makes you more efficient. So yeah, definitely. Filling up the truck a little bit more, bringing more SKUs to the store. When your field marketing team is into the store talking about Camino, well, now they're talking about mint and chocolate as well. So yeah, that getting scale, getting more product lines in there really helps to drive efficiency.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So what your efficiency, I would imagine, at some point translates to profit. You have very front-end loaded investments. You have front-end loaded in product development and, get some packaging and compliance and understanding a market. You've actually got to build some inventory. You got to put boots on the street, sales and marketing. And then you go in and you get the ball rolling, and uptake, obviously, with anything is slow and steady. Do you kind of have a philosophical goal like, geez, I'd really like to be profitable in this state after 12 months? Or is it not really a profit driven? Is it more gross margin? Like, where's the focus on what makes you feel like, yeah, we got to scale, our gross margins are the same here as they are in California or where have you?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination between gross margin and rank. So we want to look at the data and see that we're not number 14, but that we're maybe number 1 would be awesome, but on our way to number 1. So we're not super pleased unless we're number 1 or 2. That's always the goal, is to let's get some share, let's boost our rank. So, if we've spent a ridiculous amount of money to get to number 1, then that doesn't really count, right? So it's a combination between margin dollars and rank.
Yeah, no, makes sense. So let's talk about that relationship again with your partner, and let's talk about the deal, just kind of framework. I mean, I've heard co-packers say, yeah, actually, we're not going to pay you much of a royalty at all. You should just be fortunate that we're bringing your products to market in the state, and you can claim all that revenue someday. I've had others say, no, we'll pay you 15, 20% royalty. I've heard arguments going both ways on what the right range is. And I know it's not throwing darts at a dartboard, or playing a game to determine rock, paper, scissors to determine what the royalty percentage is, but what goes in to those discussions about where you'll ultimately both land from a revenue share perspective.
Yep. So I think it's super important to ensure that both businesses are getting something and are that it's healthy. Because if you go in, you negotiate this amazingly rich margin, and then now your partner's not making any money, they're not going to make your product. And what do you have? You have, 25% of nothing. So it's super important to make sure that that the relationship is equal and healthy in that way. And I think a higher margin, if you're going to try to get a higher royalty amount, then you better be worth it. And you better be supporting your product and providing service to that partner so that it's worth it and they have incentive. Because it really is the worst if you zap the incentive away from your partner. So that's a really big one. Also, marketing dollars, sales folks, like you can, if you're going to charge more, then some of that, some of what you're collecting needs to go back into the business. I think all of it right now really does go back into the business and gets reinvested into growth. But that's a big one. If you're going to charge more, then what are the services you're going to provide? And you need to make sure you have the proper team to support that. So I think when we're looking at partners or we're looking at potential groups that we're going to work with, that if they're looking for the best deal, a steal of a deal, the lowest margin they can possibly get, it's probably not going to be the right fit for us because we're more about service and adding value.
Yeah. I think people tend to skip a really important part in the process in the very beginning and really dig into, like, what are your objectives? What are your goals in this relationship? It's kind of easy to assume what Kiva's goals are, but still that discussion has to be had. But it's often hard to really understand, again, in both directions. What is the co-packer? What is the brand partner that you're dealing with in whatever state? What are their objectives? What are they trying to get out of the relationship? Because obviously we all understand we're doing this for a profit, but there's so much more to it in terms of building your own business, and you're reporting back to your shareholders and your board of, like, this is why we're doing this. Here's the value proposition, without it having all of a sudden be not vetted properly, or the relationship I'm talking about, and understand what, you don't want to find that out later. I mean, I think, is that something you push to the front and be like, why are you just a co-packer? And are you going to introduce more brands? And why did you get into this business? Because co-packing is a hard business. That's not like a piece of cake either, right? I mean,
Yep, and right. And if you're going to be a co-packer, why not add on a distribution component or a branding component? Why not own the brand and the formulations, the R&D, all of that work that goes into it? But I think as the market has been maturing, there are lanes now that people are falling into, which is really helpful for brand growth. So maybe a co-packer, they have previous co-packing experience. So that's the world that they come from. They want to stay in their lane. They maybe they've tried branding before, or maybe they've tried sales, or they're a smaller company. They don't want to expand into absolutely everything. So it's interesting how we see companies kind of evolve in what they offer and what they focus on over time. You see MSOs going and doing everything, right? That was really popular. Now people are starting to narrow in and go, okay, we're not going to focus on retail. We're just going to focus on brand. So we're starting to see a little bit more focus and companies pursuing what they think their kind of core competency is. But definitely finding out what they want to do early on, because they may, if you don't ask those questions, you may find in 2 years, oh, turns out what they really want to do is retail, and what they really want to do is focus on their house retail brands. Well, cool. You just taught them how to make all of your best stuff, right? Like you can put in your deals, like, you can't non-competes and stuff like that. But it's, the industry is small and time and resources are limited. So, we really don't ever want to consult the contract. We want these really healthy kind of symbiotic relationships where we're both going to grow and we're both going to get something out of it, because it's really hard to kind of like have recourse in this tiny market that's so, we're just very tightly knit. So yeah, you want to figure out what the incentives are and get to know each other, like just talking to other people about checking references, so to speak, right? Trying to find out who the partner is that you're working with and what their intentions are is
Well,
super.
I mean, I think that's a nice segue into the relationship, the management of the relationship. We all know cannabis, the industry, is rife with deals gone wrong, right? And it's an unfortunate part of this industry, but it's part of the legacy. Trust is a word that's thrown around very loosely. Obviously, trust is earned; it's not given. All these, catchphrases, but at the end of the day, trust is absolutely critical to your success in these new markets, both and going both ways, right? How do you build trust? How do you is it like are you cognizant of the fact where you say, look, you don't trust me yet and I don't trust you yet, we're going to try to do best efforts? Like, how do you deal with that word? How do you build trust in a relationship?
Yeah. Ooh, gosh, that is, I think doing what you say you're gonna do is huge. Being compassionate with people, it's so silly and cliche, but it's like a marriage, right? You go, okay, we're gonna try it. We're gonna start like this. Yes, you're having your issues. I'm going to be there for you when you're having your issue, and we're gonna walk through it together. Like a lot of the partnerships, because we do, what we do are out of state partnerships. We partner with groups inside of California for distribution as well, retailer partnerships. Like there's a lot of compassion, understanding, extending yourself maybe a little bit more than you kind of want to, right? A little vulnerability that you have to kind of show when you're trying to build trust. So I think those are really big. Also, like shit talking and drama is it's like there's no room for that. And also getting overly emotional, right? Like it's business, deals are going to go south. Like you may accuse me of something and I might accuse you of something, but at the end of the day, like we're both trying to run our businesses here, and getting emotional about it and accusing each other isn't going to really buy us a lot. So yeah, I think we try to omit the drama and that kind of those tensions, and that level of intensity kind of from the deals, and just we're all trying to work for the same thing here. So if we can treat each other with respect, I think that will build the trust over time, and also not giving up at the first issue, right? Talking through things. Issues will come up, and a strong relationship, a strong marriage can weather those storms. So yeah.
I remember, 2000, late 2017, early 2018, California goes rec legal, talking to all these dispensaries, and I say, what's your favorite brand? And they say, the one that shows up when they said they were going to show up, right?
Yes.
I mean, so really from the, starting, I mean, trust is something, again, it goes both ways, of course, but when you say, like, just do what you said you're going to do, like, don't sell me something that doesn't sync with your competencies. If you've got a gummy machine, but you've never made a gummy, I need to know, right? And so I think, working through those issues of, what you can do, what you can't do, and a salesperson will never say no. They'll always say, yes, we can do that. But then you get to the back office and people are like, why did you make that promise? And it can ruin the relationship. So I think that, you take that in what is CPG for you, and the critical nature of your product needing to be the exact same user experience in every market. And you have risk. associated with this brand expansion strategy, and you need to protect at the cost of your brand, the quality and the SOPs and all that go into it. What do you do when it doesn't hit your spec? Like, how do you deal with those? You can go there and you're like, well, you got to ship me some before I taste it or whatever. I go to your market and I taste one. How do you deal with like those, the CPG consistency and the importance of that when things might be off by an order of magnitude or just maybe a few percentage points?
Yep. So I think we look at the problem objectively. Like, what are the reasons the product is out of spec? So let's take taste, for example. So, okay, the product does not taste good. Why? Well, typically the worst tasting part of the product is the cannabis. So what's going on with the weed, right? Like, let's look at the extraction. If it's Camino and it tastes bad, then there's something going on with the distillate. Okay, what's going on with the distillate? It's probably too low THC content. Okay, that's okay, cool. So what we need to do is find higher THC distillate. Like, we've made all these mistakes in California over the years. So we're able to counsel and help and problem solve with our partners. And that's hugely important. Also understanding the market dynamics there. So in some states, like, weed is really expensive. In other states, it's super duper cheap. And so you can, if it's really cheap in California to get a certain extraction method, but in another state, it's prohibitively expensive, well, then we both have a problem here that we need to solve together. So I think identifying what is the issue, looking back at past experiences that we have, and then just working together, right? It doesn't work if you go, hey, this product tastes like garbage, let's rip it all off the market and burn it. Like that, well, they put cost into that. There's some investment that's already been made in that product. So let's see what we can do to get us back on the right track. That's much more of the approach that we take with our partners.
Makes sense. Reminding all the attendees, we are going to do Q&A with Kristi in about 5-10 minutes, so feel free to enter some questions into the dialogue box and we'll get to that. Yeah, that kind of goes back to that issue of supply chain, controlling your own destiny, and you being very involved in the supply chain. What is give me an example, if you can, of what you do to go beyond the call of duty, or what your partner might do to go beyond the call of duty. I mean, because I think part of it is like sharing data. Is there something that we can every day we can both look at? Obviously there's sales data, but there's production data, and just like, opening up the way that we communicate, the way we track all this, the way we get in front of problems, long before they are, significantly and damaging to both of us, the co-packer and the brand, or the two brands that have partnered together. What are some of those, what are some of those communication tools, and how many people, like how many chefs in the kitchen, so to speak, do you have? Is there like, have you found that it's just better to have like a state manager that deals with everything and is obsessing on every detail? Or is that something that you do and you'll go into a dashboard? Give us a little better understanding of that communication back and forth and tracking of data.
Yep. So a couple years ago, when we decided really to more heavily invest in our out-of-state expansion efforts, we renamed our whole team from, we had marketing folks and we had geo folks, we called them. We went, all right, this is the growth team, because it's not just growth about California, it's growth for the whole organization in every market. So just shifting the way we talk about it, think about it, was huge. Was a really nice, was a smart move at the time, and still serves the organization very well today. So the growth team is, it starts with business development, pulling in the right, what markets, what deals, what structures, what partners. So that's like new market development. Then it gets handed over, once the deal is signed and kind of the arrangements made, it gets handed over to the like the general management team, the day-to-day management team. But even before that deal is signed, you know, a facilities quality person is going in with business development to make sure, right, do they have the right space? Do they have the right air conditioning system? You know, like, do they have the capabilities, infrastructure to actually make the product? So, you know, once that has been signed off and now it's on the general management team, it's packaging development, it's team development, who's going to be there in market. So that's a, you know, that's a sales function, that's a regional sales director role. I mean, we even have somebody who is managing swag and sending, like they get like swag deployment is like their job, right? But you know, it gets extremely detailed and it gets extremely complex. But it helps to have a bit of overlap within the team. So you've got folks managing like all of the packaging. Then what ends up happening is a market is running low, or a shipping container is delayed, and now they can say, okay, well, Michigan has an extra 10,000 tins. That's going to last them 6 months. Who knows? So sure, Illinois, you can take some of the Michigan tins that are on hand. That'll buy you an extra 3 months. And, you know, with this over label, you can slap that on and now you have a product, you have that continuation of that product and market. And so that having people a little bit more centralized, working on different markets, helps us solve problems like that. So it's a combination. It sort of depends on where we are, what level or what function, what department of the company we're speaking about. But yeah, I think a lot of overlap like that really helps serve the states to the best abilities.
That's great. No, very, very, I mean, efficient and coordinated, and, you know, becoming really just process, right? It's just a process driven, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that's one of the objectives that we have for this year coming is like, how do we make it easier to find that tin, you know, that, so yes, process. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Last question before we take some questions from the audience is this concept of differentiation, right? And it's a word that's used a lot. I certainly, you know, differentiation and mergers and acquisitions is critical and all that, but, you know, what does that mean to you, right? Differentiation, because you've got competitors, but then you've also just got your brand and your ethos and your culture. Like, what goes into, like, how do you stand out? I mean, your products are great, but other companies' products are good and you know, as well, right? So how do you, like, what are the things that go into, like, okay, we're entering a new market, we've got to tell them our California story. Like, what do you do to differentiate your brand to rise above the noise in a very loud, you know, confusing market?
Yep. So I think identifying trends, setting and leading trends is really important. So, and that, you know, is thinking outside the box. And also, I mean, that's innovation, and that's what Kiva is like all about in our core, is coming out with like cool new stuff that people are going to fall in love with. Cool new edible products has really been where we've stayed in our 12 years. But you know, we've also made a consistent effort not to come out with stuff that exists in the market just because, right? So we don't have a smokable, we don't have an inhalable, because I don't know, I can't make a better vape pen. Like, I don't know how to make a better pre-roll either. So in California, we've worked with other supplier companies to offer those products to the market, but we don't make our own pre-rolls or inhalables because we feel like we can't add value there. And that is so crucial to leading trends and staying relevant and staying top of mind and being cool, is coming out with neat, interesting stuff that re-engages the consumer time and time again. Because I think people do, human nature, we want new, different, exciting. And so if you stop innovating and stop giving people the opportunity to continuously buy back into your brand, you're going to lose them, right? They're going to go off and find other products to buy. You may get your core group of folks that always buy your, like, our sleep Camino, right? People will drive to a different store to get Sleep Camino if their shop is out. But that sleep, like that, that's like a protected use case, right? Like, don't mess with my sleep. So, but if we don't keep coming out with turkey gravy or collaborations with Lost Farm and like different extraction collaborations too, like if we don't keep enriching the consumer's experience, they're going to go elsewhere. So yeah, you got to find unique things that add value to the consumer experience and aren't just like these tag along second to market type products.
Yeah, oh, makes sense. Good stuff. So we've got a couple of questions around just what's the hardest part of all this? What's the most challenging part of expanding into a new market? What would you say?
Oh my gosh, the hardest part. Oh, I can only pick one. I think I think the hardest part is the partner selection, is who you are actually going to work with. Because if you don't get that right, you don't have anything, right? Packaging is hard, making sure you are properly staffed for that market. All of that is hard, but those are issues that are more easily solved than if you go into the market, fast forward a couple years, and it's just not working. It's very difficult to shift over to a new group. So that I would say is hardest and most crucial to get right from the get-go.
You mentioned something in that. You mentioned packaging. We haven't really touched on that. I mean, do you have the packaging team in California and then ship the packaging to each state, or do you have the partner that is more intimately involved in the compliance and the packaging rules? Do you work with them and then they produce the packaging in their own state? How do you deal with the packaging? We got a couple of questions on that.
Yep, a little bit of a hybrid for what you just explained. So we identify the vendor. We used to do that, bring their packaging into our facility and then ship it out, but it's like just way too much. So what we do now is we kind of set up those relationships with the vendors, and then the partners call that vendor and they manage their own par levels and their own shipping, and there's minimums, of course, so they have to hit those minimums, but all of that is explained and taught to the partner kind of up front so they can manage it themselves. But no, they are definitely not producing their own product or their own packaging. They're not designing their own packaging. We like that gets me a little like, woo, no, there's no way we could let a partner like get that involved in the branding. Like that part has to be ultra tight. And with child proofing and all of that stuff, like you want to identify your vendors for your partners, because that's a whole beast in of itself. So yeah, that's how it seems to work best for us now.
So the sales and marketing influence that you have in every market it includes packaging and your ability to you control that as well.
Yep. And then that gives us like better minimums and just a better vetting process of the vendor. And then greater consistency across all packs, all markets. You want that same look and feel as much as you can get it, right? And regulations are different in every state and every market. So like, you need a pouch in one market, but you can have a tin in another. You can't have pictures of fruit on this pack in this market, and they all have different universal symbols and like it. So it gets real squirrely real quick, but yeah, having one central vendor for all packages to come out of for one product line is the way to go for us that we found.
Makes sense. Here's another question, maybe an easy answer. What is the royalty fee that you demand? Is that off of gross or net?
That's off of gross. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, off of gross. That is it. Yeah.
One more question I think that a lot of people are talking about and very interested in right now is the state of New York. There's an awful lot of people that are saying, wow, New York looks just like California, so it's going to be competitive. It's the wild, wild east. It's obviously got some phenomenal objectives and in terms of equity and all that. but it's a crazy market, and obviously, you know, it's already a popular place for California brands. What is your view of how do we know, you know, we've heard about what the MSOs think about New York and how the New York treats the big MSOs, but from a leading brand perspective, how do you look at the state of New York and its importance to your future success as a company?
Extremely important. Yeah, extremely important. The size of the market, the population, the already like acceptance, the level of acceptance to cannabis in New York is amazing. The fact that we already have we have decent brand recognition in New York because of the super strong unlicensed market that operates there. So people know Kiva, and most of the people know, I'd say most consumers there already know of brands outside of the state. So there is awareness of brands, which is interesting and kind of cool. So yeah, New York, amazing what they're trying to do with social equity. Like, love that. That is, I have to highlight them for their efforts there, because they're taking it to a different level than we've seen in California, like in Oakland. They're really doing a lot of investment there. Hopefully it works out as intended. You know, the devil's in the details, and we'll see, but amazing effort that they're putting forth there. And then lastly, I think, you know, New York is the gateway like to the rest of the world. And California, sure, we get a lot of tourism, but it's not like New York tourism, right? It's different. So I think it's going to really help open up cannabis brands, cannabis as just a product type in and of itself to the rest of the world, which is like really exciting. We can't say that for any other market.
Yeah. That leads to our last question, which is, what new markets are you excited to explore?
Yes. Okay. New York, totally. But Florida is super interesting. New Jersey, super interesting. Pennsylvania. And then really the world is our oyster, right? So we launched in Canada this year. People are starting to talk about Germany. So yeah, we're still like, you know, baseball analogy, we're like in that first inning. So it's so new still, even though cannabis has been around for so long. And, you know, in the US, especially in California, right here in the Bay Area, like we're in our tiny little cannabis bubble. We think everybody smokes weed all the time. But, you know, they don't, they're still learning, and they're unfamiliar with the product and unfamiliar with the brand. So yeah, there is just, every market is really interesting, and there's so much potential for growth.
How fired up would you be to walk into a dispensary in Berlin and see Kiva products on the wall?
Oh, you know what? That would be amazing. And what would even up that one more is to walk into a grocery store in Berlin, because,
Yes.
ooh, I would love the level of accessibility of cannabis to be at the level of any other consumer product, like a beer or a wine even, right? Like if you could go to a grocery store or a sporting place or an airport, or, I mean, that would just be like, I would retire.
Awesome, awesome, Kristi. Well, we're going to wrap up now. I can't thank you enough for joining us. Your insight and knowledge and experience has been so valuable. I'm sure all our listeners got a ton out of it. We're very grateful to have you on board, and you know, can't thank you enough to join us. So thank you so much, Kristi Palmer, co-founder of Kiva Confections. And what is the number of states you're in? And by the end of 22, you're in?
By about 11.
11 states. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. We'll take you on again a year from now. You'll be in 22, and we'll keep growing. Awesome, Kristi. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thanks, folks, for joining us. Please don't forget to register for our next session on December 13th with Sandra Zagrebski of partner at Clark Hill Law Firm, who's going to share with us the legal structure and all the dynamics of that deal, putting that deal together. Thank you all for coming. We will have the recording of this show on the website up and running in about 24 hours. So share with your friends for increased learning about cannabis brand expansion. Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye, Kristi.